Hi, everybody. My name is Diego. I am the program manager for curriculum and file development here at LAMDL, and my job is to just make debate easier for you. So today we're going to be going over how to create good rebuttal speeches. So we're going to be going over the four rebuttal speeches, and we're just going to talk about some general pieces of advice to make them just better. So let's talk about the goal of a rebuttal first. Across all of the four rebuttal speeches that happen in a debate, so the 1NR, 1AR, 2NR, and 2AR, is that you should be wanting to close doors. So by this point, the 2AC and the block, so the 2NC and the 1NR, have thrown a bunch of arguments at the judge to evaluate, right? The 2AC 8-minute speech that contains a lot of arguments. The block is two negative speeches that come back to back. So there's a bunch of like floating pieces that the judge does not really know what to do with. Your goal in this debate is to just simply simplify the debate down to its core issues and explain to the judge why you are winning them. Before we talk about what I mean by judge instruction, the quick thing to note is that the 1NR is the only speech where we are not going to talk about too much. The reason is because the 1NR is not really a rebuttal, whereas in a rebuttal, you're comparing arguments that have already been said before. The 1NR, you can make new arguments. It's a back-to-back negative speech. You can treat it as just an extension of the 2NC, right? That's why the 1NR is allowed to read new evidence. The 1NR is allowed to make new arguments. In a rebuttal, you cannot be making any new arguments. Your goal is to just simplify the debate and down to its core issues, because the rebuttal is to just respond to arguments that exist and explain why you are winning those things. Every speech past the 1NR is comparing speeches only. The 1NR can read new evidence, the 1NR can make new arguments, but every speech after that, the 1AR, 2NR, 2AR, cannot make any new arguments at all. So the goal of the 1AR, 2NR, and 2AR is to close doors. Second, it is also to give the judge instruction for how they should be voting. So the top of your rebuttals should be able to write the judge's decision for them. So what I mean by that is, like, think of it as you're holding their hand in their explanation of why you should win. By the end of the debate, the 2NR and the 2AR, the top couple of sentences that start off each speech should be an attempt to write the decision out for them. So, like, if you were the judge judging yourself in the debate, how would you want the decision to be given? The top of the 2NR and 2AR should be the exact words that the judge gives you at the end of the round. If it is not that, it means you have not done judge instruction correctly. So closed doors and judge instruction are the primary goals of any rebuttal speech, and we're going to talk about how each speech does that. The first thing we need to talk about is the 1AR. So the 1AR is the hardest speech in a debate round. It is basically 5 minutes of the affirmative trying to respond to 13 minutes of negative arguments. So that's the 2NC and the 1NR. The way that you make sure that you don't feel like you're time pressed, to make sure that you're not like dropping any arguments or making sure that there's no hole that's left uncovered. You want to make sure that your 1AR prioritizes your offense at the top of the debate, which just means your overview, your general summary of why we should be voting affirmative. What I mean by prioritizing offense is why your case outweighs their arguments and why you make the world a better place. Think of the 1AR as the point where you should start telling the judge as the affirmative what are the most important issues in this debate. That's why you want to prioritize your offense at the top of the debate. But at the same time, you also want to make sure that you answer the negatives most offensive arguments first. So your overview should be an extension of offense, and then immediately after, before you start going down the flow, explaining, responding to each argument in the order that it comes in, you should prioritize negative offensive arguments first. By neg offense, I just mean arguments that show the affirmative makes the world a worse place. In the case of the files for this year on the Arctic topic, that's the deep sea mining turn for your case files. The next thing you want to do in your 1AR is categorize arguments. Like I said, you will not be able to go argument for argument with the negative. 13 minutes of negative arguments, like, the point of that is to make sure that the 1AR feels time pressed. The 1AR is not going to be able to go like, a word for word on every single argument that the negative makes. So categorizing arguments and grouping them is going to be the 1AR's like best friend in this instance. So you should group arguments into similar categories and apply your arguments in an organized manner. What I mean by categories and grouping is, for example, if the argument no solvency appears 4 times throughout the 2NC and the 1NR, you as the 1AR should tell the judge to group all of them and then list out your arguments against them. So they're going to seem scattered on the floor for the judge. What you are telling the judge to do is make a label on the 1AR column saying answers to no solvency, and then you're just going to rattle off your arguments right there. It makes the debate more cohesive, gets you higher speaker points, and then it increases your chance of winning. And then always remember to explain why your arguments come first over theirs. So let's look at an example. I'm going to use this example of this flow of this debate that's happening. We're going over the 2NC speech, and then we're going to see how the 1AR can consolidate and group things together to make sure that they're not pressed for time. So in the 2NC/1NR, the negative makes the following arguments in this exact order. And this again taken from a judge's flow on a debate from this topic. The 2NC speech, they have this overview at the top. They're explaining why their arguments mean that the AF makes the world worse. And then on the actual LAMDL line, in response to 2AC1, that deep sea mining is good for the environment, the negative has 4 different arguments right here. What you're going to see is that I've color coded some of these arguments that appear multiple times in just different variations. So for example, against 2AC1, the first negative argument is deep sea mining deep sea mining is bad. All right. If we look at number 4 in response to 2AC1, it says deep sea mining hurts coral reefs. These two can be categorized as the same argument. It's just the reason why deep sea mining is bad for the environment. Then we go in response to 2AC2, climate change causes extinction. The negative extends this deep sea mining turn again. Against 2AC3, we see it again. And we see the same thing happening for other arguments such as no solvency technology gaps in response to 2AC1, but we also see it in response to 2AC3 as well, right? We see technology gaps as being given a reason why the affirmative does not solve. Other arguments are unique, right? Too expensive. Over here, we have deep sea mining fails can reach critical areas and environmental conditions, right? But the point is that what a strategic 1AR will do is notice these patterns and see that although there are 13 minutes worth of negative arguments, the affirmative can group these things together and show the judge that the negative isn't really saying like too many different things, and that you can instead categorize negative arguments under a broad pattern of argumentation. So the 1AR strategy in response to this example flow from the 2NC should be telling the judge to group all deep sea mining turn arguments and grouping all arguments that say no solvency technology gaps. And then you would allow yourself to say all of your arguments in one place. So the format would be, 1AR overview. So you're explaining AF offense right here, why the affirmative makes the world a better place. And then after that, you would start off by grouping the arguments that you notice a pattern in, and then you would just put your AF answers all in one place. This is a lot better than, for example, other 1ARs may try to say, we'll say my overview, then we'll respond to the negative overview. Then I'll extend 2AC1, and then after that, I'll answer all of these 4 arguments. Then I'll answer 2AC2. I'll answer this argument right here. Then I'll answer like their answers to 2AC3. The point is that is way too much and just like way too confusing for the judge. Like you're not collapsing, you're not consolidating arguments into broader broader core issues in the round. By the time we get to the rebuttals, your goal should be to be able to explain the debate to the judge in a way that isolates the core issues in the round. The faster you get to that compared to your opponents, the more likely of a chance you have to win. And you just see more organized. See, like instead of going like argument for argument, this 1AR is a lot more clear. It is our overview. After that, we're answering any argument that says deep sea mining turn. And remember, that pops up about 4 different times in the 2NC. We're just grouping all of it, making the debate more organized for the judge, and putting all of our AF answers right there. We're doing the same thing for arguments that say no solvency technology gaps, and we're putting all the AF answers in one place. After that, we're cleaning up the rest of the flow. By clean up, it just means any part that we may have left out in those groupings, we answer that in the order that it came in. So for example, after we're done doing our grouping, our categorizing of arguments, if I go back up over here, we haven't answered no solvency too expensive. So the 1AR would answer that next. After the too expensive, we keep looking for anything we haven't grouped yet, and that is deep sea mining fails can reach critical areas. So we would put that right there, and then so forth. So again, goal of the 1AR is extend your offense, prioritize your offense first. That should be in the overview. After that, you should be trying to group and categorize arguments to make sure that you don't fall behind because of the time pressure. All right. Last part of this is talking about the 2NR and the 2AR. So the 2NR and the 2AR, I split up into two different categories. The first part of a 2NR or 2AR should be the final overview, and it should be like a really big overview explaining what the core issues are and why you're going to win the round. And then the rest of it should just be cleaning up the flow, just making sure that you're not leaving any stone unturned. You're making sure that you're covering all of the arguments possible. But the first part of your rebuttal should be a succinct summary of why you're winning the round and why the opponent has lost. We can think of this in like three different things that the overview should have. The final overview is like the most important part of a debate for the judge because the 2NR and 2AR should be trying to write the ballot for the judge. Again, this goes back to the beginning of this where your rebuttals should try to go word for word. If you were the judge in the back, what would you want to hear the judge say at the end of the round, right? If you want the judge to vote for you, why, like, what would you want the judge to say? Why would they have voted for your side? You should not like leave a round being unsure of why you can win the round. The goal of this final overview is to summarize the round for the judge and explain why is it that you win the round. So I think of this as three main things. First, you should always identify one thing you for sure have won in this round. Don't think of it as like a really big like thing like we've won the entire debate. That's not really helpful for the judge. You want to identify one argument you have for sure won in this round, and it could be anything from, you know, if you're the AF, you have won that, like you have won the solvency argument for sure, or if you're AF, you have for sure won the impact to the affirmative. If you're negative, maybe you for sure won like the deep sea mining turn. Up to you. But identify that one thing and then explain why it wins you the entire round. The second part is identify one thing your opponent has messed up on and why it loses them the entire debate. It should not be enough for you to just say, I've won this, therefore I win. You should also be telling the judge in your final overview what has the other side messed up on and why does that cost them the entire debate. The third part is explain to the judge what the opponent could have done to win, but ultimately did not. Again, put yourself in the judge's shoes. As the judge, like whenever I judge around or whenever somebody else judges around, we have to like explain these three things every single time we give an RFD. We always have to explain what is the one argument we were most convinced on. That's number one for this overview. The second thing we have to explain is where we think the other side messed up on, which again, you should be doing in your final overview. And then the last thing we have to do is give advice to the losing side. What could they have done to win, but they did not do in this round? If you do that as the actual debaters in the round, you have it shows to the judge that like you can package things nicely, you understand what's going on in the round, and that you have a good like grip on what's going on round vision wise. So after you're done doing this overview, you should like your overview in this final rebuttal should be the thing you have most confidence on, the things you know you are winning, the things you know that the opponent is behind on. After that, it is just line by line, just making sure you're cleaning up the flow, making sure you're not dropping any arguments, so that way your opponent can't do this to you. That should be a goal of your final overview. There are some people who argue that overview should not be long. My general piece of advice is as long as it takes, as long as you're identifying these three things in your final overview, it does not matter how long this overview is, as long as it's doing the right things. So these overviews can sometimes be quick, like 30 seconds. Other people take 2 minutes. To me, again, it really is make sure you have done all these three things and then clean up the flow. All right. So some scenarios to think about that help you picture this is let's look at this app scenario. The app is for sure winning that deep sea mining is the only way to access critical minerals. After that, you have to explain why would this argument mean you win the entire debate. Maybe this means that like if deep sea mining is the only way to get access to critical minerals, that means there is no other approach that is conceivable right now that lets us solve climate change. So the app is winning that they are the only pathway to solve climate change. Therefore, the app is the only one that has an inroads to a climate change impact. So that's one way you can explain you're winning the debate. The negative has dropped or not answered that deep sea mining is safe. Well, if they have dropped this, then that means that they can't go for the deep sea mining turn, because if deep sea mining is safe, they'll never win the argument that deep sea mining is dangerous. And then the only way the negative can win this debate is if they win the deep sea mining turn. And then you would explain they have not won this deep sea mining turn because they have not answered that deep sea mining is safe. So you would create an overview using this scenario. And then let's look at this negative scenario. You are for sure winning that deep sea mining historically fails because of technological gaps. If you are for sure winning that, then that means the judge should be extremely skeptical that the affirmative can solve like the impacts to climate change, because it means that their internal link to that, the ability for them to get critical minerals, is just moot. They can't do it because of technological gaps. Uh, the affirmative has messed up by not explaining why their evidence is more credible. If that's the case, then the AF can for sure not win this round because the negative has the most credible evidence in this round. And then the only way the affirmative can win is if they win that deep sea mining guarantees access to critical minerals. Again, they have not won this because you are for sure winning on the negative side, that deep sea mining historically fails because of technological gaps. So using these scenarios, you should try and write the final overview. Doesn't matter how long it takes, as long as you're doing these three things. All right. That is some advice about how you should think about your final overviews. You should not immediately start by trying to answer the negatives arguments or the AFS arguments. You always want to start off with a final overview, summarizing to the judge why you have won the round. All right. I think this is one of the most important things, one of the most important skills that you can learn from debate, because it amplifies your round vision. The more you can understand what's going on in the actual debate, the more better off you will be as you continue moving up.